So yesterday in Newswave, we talked about all those images that started to show up on Christmas Day for the Switch 2, or the alleged images, I should say, of this system from Nintendo, that we're starting to get a pretty good idea as to what to expect when Nintendo does eventually show the thing, which, I mean, we're basically on like the final countdown just about as we get into 2025, since technically the latest, according to Nintendo themselves, March 31st, 2025. So we're like 90 days away from that. I'm expecting them to get things started obviously sooner than that. Like, I don't think they're going to wait till the final moment to do it. But still, because of these images, a certain conversation really kicked off online, because it does seem like the naming convention around this system is becoming more and more likely as to what we're going to get here, and it's actually ended up being a bit more controversial than I was expecting, but I wanted to go over some of that here today because I have actually seen already in some of the comment sections and stuff around these images really going crazy around the Nintendo Switch 2, but I wanted to get your guys' take down below. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. So first of all, let's take a look at really the image that started to really get this going, and that has to do with this blurry, cropped, zoomed in image. All right, now what it essentially shows us is that the naming convention, the idea would indeed be Nintendo Switch with a 2 on the end, which is for the most part how we've all been kind of referring to this thing, because we're trying to figure out what Nintendo would call it. Would it be Super Nintendo Switch? Is that possible, right? We talked about how a mid-gen refresh could have been the Nintendo Switch Pro. So going off of that potential naming convention, okay, the Nintendo Switch 2, the sequel to the Switch. To me, it makes sense in my mind here, but it seemed to cause a lot of discussion around if this is a mistake from Nintendo. And I mean, it was all over social media, different forums, videos on YouTube and other places. And like, for example, this is a kind of a meme that was posted up that had more than 1.4 million views on it, and likes, comments, the whole thing of how everyone reacting to the Switch 2's final name compared to Sony, where they go PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 now. It's like Nintendo Switch to Switch 2 is like inappropriate. It's not a good idea. Go with something else now. And, well, there's a few things with that, okay? So for one, if this is if this is the logo that they go with and it looks that similar, I mean, we see the alleged front of this dock. Kind of looks like that would be, I guess, the idea then is to still keep a very similar logo, just slap a 2 on the side. We don't actually know, though, if this is a legit image, of course. Any of this stuff could just be fabricated and made up, since there have already been traces of AI and stuff found in some of these images, mostly for, we believe, the background to kind of mask their identity. But still, to me, this is still up in the air as to if this is legitimate. However, the Switch 2, I think for Nintendo, actually makes a lot of sense. And let's go over some of the reasons that I've been able to find as I was looking around as to why people are not as excited about Nintendo going this path. All right, so the first one that's pretty obvious is this would be very basic for Nintendo. I mean, this would be as traditional as possible for the follow-up to a very successful system. So rather than doing something weird and completely changing the brand, the naming, everything, they would just put a 2 on the end and call it a day. And that is not very creative for a company that likes to really buck the trend consistently. So, for better or worse sometimes, right? Like, sometimes they'll do stuff and you scratch your head and you're like, Nintendo, what's going on here? And it turns out to be a bad decision for them, like as a lot of people have pointed to with the Wii U. Other times ends up being a very good decision, like, hey, guess what? The Switch. So again, it's hit or miss for Nintendo. And in this way, I actually think this is them playing it safe, sure, but also understanding that they have a very good naming convention, but also a very good brand here with the Switch. I mean, the Switch obviously explains what the system is known for in one word, and it's brilliant marketing, a brilliant name. Them coming up with it to kick off the generation, it worked really well. It all clicked into place. And that also played into the marketing where it makes the click noise with the Switch. So in that way, they've spent what's about to be 8 years. I mean, it's crazy to think about that. But by the first week of March 2025, it will officially be 8 years that the Switch has been on the market. So there are many kids now who maybe they got the system Christmas 2017, they could have gone from the 4th grade all the way and finished high school and going into college. And this has been the only system they know. So there's an entire generation that's coming up right now and is going into college, into eventually the workforce here in a few years. And this is their first system they've ever owned, like personally. That's a big deal. And that's a very strong brand to grow with a generation that has been more interested, let's be real, in things like phone games or tablets or touch screens rather than controllers. And we see like the Roblox stuff, Fortnite, and it's getting harder and harder to keep this newer generation invested and involved, or even get them into what we all look at as more traditional gaming with a controller and a TV or a handheld, right? So in that way, Nintendo probably wants to keep that brand alive and just put a 2 on the end and call it a day. Now, the other thing that always gets brought up, and I've already kind of mentioned it, is the Wii U. They said, wow, the Wii is successful. Let's put a U on the end. I mean, the Wii brand is so strong, but around that time, the Wii had actually sputtered a bit, and I feel like people forget this. When they started to really push the Wii U and introduce it and stuff, the Wii had actually been declining quite heavily the past year and a half. Like it sold a lot in like a 4.5-year window, and then it fell off a cliff. Nintendo didn't really think to do some sort of revision, anything. I mean, here at least they did the Switch OLED and they did a Switch Lite to cut the price down. With the Wii, they did like the Wii Mini thing for really cheap, but it cut out so many features. They removed the GameCube compatibility. What they really should have done was some sort of Wii HD system with an HDMI port on it, because the flat screen TVs were becoming more and more common, and at least had something to bridge the gap there until the Wii U. But they just kind of allowed it to flounder around on the market, and that name had lost a lot of momentum. Right now, the Switch still has a lot of momentum. It does. It's weird as it sounds, because we're about to be 8 years through the generation for this system. You still see it consistently selling in places like Japan. The last report that we had for Famitsu in terms of sales, 100,000 Switch systems sold. That is ridiculous. You don't want to really move off of that, but you also don't want to do it with the Wii U, where it did sound like it was just part of the Wii family. The Wii U. Oh, cool, it's an accessory. It's a tablet. At retail, everyone who came in was just confused about what they saw, and they assumed it was for their Wii, not a new system. Whereas now, with the numbering idea, Switch 2, we have been so trained to understand that means it's a new system. So look at your phones, for example, with we're up to what, the iPhone 16, Samsung Galaxy S, I don't know, what are they up to now, 20 something? It's to the point where we're double digits for some of these devices. And even if you look in the realm of gaming, PlayStation with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Microsoft got a little weird with things to where they went Xbox 360, Xbox One, Xbox Series. So they're all over the map. And I honestly, I think the Xbox One naming convention actually hurt them a bit. I think most people would agree with that, because it sounded like they're going backwards when really they were trying to say this is the one box you need for your living room and that's it. Didn't really communicate like that to the consumers, and there were some other issues clearly when they first showed it with DRM and used games maybe not being a thing, and it was just terrible communication all the way around. In this case, though, Switch 2, that's straightforward. It's easy to understand. Okay, what's the hot thing this year at Christmas? Oh, the follow-up to the Switch 2. I'll take that. Whereas the Wii, it's like, oh, I'll take the Wii. I think the Wii U, do I need the Wii also to buy one of those? Do you guys still sell them? That's what we go through constantly with that. For the few people that actually came in even looking for a Wii U, that is. You could probably make a case for, will this system be able to differentiate itself enough from the current Switch if it doesn't have some large concept attached to it that really takes the current system to the next level? I still think there is something we don't necessarily know about here. Go figure, right? Because they haven't necessarily unveiled it. But I think currently people believe that this system, this Switch 2, will just be the same system they have now, but stronger. I don't think it's quite that simple. I feel like there is something Nintendo has up their sleeve for this one. It could come down to that C button, but there's something else there to my understanding. So we'll see if maybe that's enough to push it over the edge here and make it feel like it's its own thing and not just an attachment or another system in the line of Switch consoles and handhelds. So I think the Switch 2 name is the correct one for them to go with. I think if they tried to get a little too weird, it would end up backfiring on them. But at the same time, I also don't think the Switch 2 is necessarily going to be able to sell the same way that the current Switch did, as a number of units. It's going to be very difficult. And I mean, honestly, some people might look at that and say, wow, look at this, that they should have gone with something else because this only sold 110 or 120 million units, whereas the Switch, the original one, sold 165 million when it was all said and done. Like, it's very difficult to get back to that point. Like, I don't think the PlayStation 5 is going to sell the same number of systems the PlayStation 4 sold. I think they're going to come up a little short of that one. So it really just depends. Right place, right time. Nintendo was certainly there with the Switch for the marketing. We also had the situation with the pandemic and people had to stay inside, and we saw a huge surge of spending in the entertainment sector, especially when it came to just game consoles and game software. So everything was kind of bloated in terms of just like sales charts there, and we're kind of seeing a correction anyway for that. But it was just all these different things, these storms all coming together, and it ended up showing that Nintendo had a system that could really catch on in the mainstream and sell a ton of units. So I still think the Switch 2 is the way to go here, even if they end up coming up short compared to the Switch, because at the end of the day, they still sell a ton of software, and that's mostly what they care about, is being able to sell 20, 30 million units for some of their biggest franchises. I still think that's going to happen for titles like Pokemon, Mario, Zelda, and maybe even someday like Splatoon could get there, but I still think they're going to be able to do that very well. It really, to me, comes down to the cost to develop and if they can keep that under control, because to me, that's going to be the biggest hurdle going into a generation where we expect them to start getting things like 4K figured out and probably higher fidelity games in general. But hey, maybe they'll get a bunch of third-party support more so than before, because the Switch certainly proved itself there, so I would assume many of these companies will show up sooner rather than later. But when it comes to the naming, Switch 2, I think I'm good with that one. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. As I saw some people say, hey, you know what? I wish it was called the Super Switch. Like, that would have been the move there. I don't know why they're going this route. Or let me know if you think that, hey, you know what? Play it safe. Don't get weird with it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.